E te whānau. Good morning to my fellow councillors, to our staff, to our public submitters waiting so patiently. We are going to start off with our council karakia. Kia inoi tātou. Tuia e runga, tuia e raro, tuia e roto, tuia e waho, tuia ngā kaimahi o te konihira o Kirikiriroa, whaia te iti kahurangi, kia u, kia mau, kia ita, haumie, huie, taiki. Wonderful. So, another excellent topic for us to be hearing from the public about today. We're going to start at the start. So I have apologies from Mayor Southgate for full absence on council business. Do I have any other apologies? Your second? No other apologies? I will. And no early departures? I think this might be a short one, so. Wonderful, okay. I'll move, Councillor McIndoe will second. All in favour? Confirmation of the agenda. I'll move, Councillor Maxine will second. All those in favour? Wonderful. Are there any declarations of interest? Very interested. That's wonderful. Then we have the confirmation of the regulatory and hearings open minutes. And Councillor Ewan will move and Angela, Deputy Mayor O'Leary will second. All those in favour? Awesome. And then we will move on to the public submissions. And I was going to say lucky last. No, lucky first is Jeremy Mayle. So you get 10 whole minutes, Jeremy. Not like last time where we squeezed you into even less.
Nice to be back again. Today, arts and infrastructure policy. Creative Waikato has been pleased to support the development of this arts and infrastructure policy, building from initial discussions with Creative Ambassador Angela O'Leary in connection to the long-term plan, and then working with council staff through the initial strategic development of this policy as a featured component of the broader Hamilton Arts Action Plan. Finally, through to this process of community consultation, and all of these things have been a positive experience with an exciting vision for the future of the city. It's been great to read the feedback from the community to this draft policy, including large-scale support, it seems, for the core principles. Also want to acknowledge the other speakers who are giving their time to present on this today. It seems clear that this presents a positive framework to support the next steps in this policy process. In case it isn't clear, Creative Waikato supports this draft policy and recommends it for full implementation. The recently adopted Arts Action Plan outlines some of the potential future supports for this policy that address some of the opportunities expressed in the feedback, from developing guidance documents and an implementation plan to support the strategic and effective implementation of this policy, utilising sector expertise and guidance in future activation, providing support for artists and staff to facilitate meaningful relationships early in the process to ensure efficiencies and effectiveness, and to work to develop a clear pathway for expert guidance, mana whenua engagement around cultural narratives, and an evaluation framework to monitor the process throughout. The concept of arts and infrastructure is not a new one. This is something that humans have done throughout the ages, and it is often these integrations that become significant markers of place and space, creating character, opportunities for story, and a pathway to create a deeper sense of connection for both residents and visitors. The idea of having a policy like this encourages council to do more of what is already emerging through the recent work you've been doing. This is award-winning and exciting recent work. The idea of a % for art policy, which is also a reasonably standard benchmark that has existed for a long time in other places in New Zealand as well as throughout the world. This idea supports placemaking, making more effective outcomes through bringing artists into the process early, and ideally enables more opportunities for communities to experience local art expressions which have been shown to support social connection as well as contribute positively to the livability of communities and increase values connected to things like properties, but also desirable community outcomes and tourism. Creative New Zealand previously made a submission to the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, who were looking at opportunities for future-focused infrastructure. And in it, Creative New Zealand share that there's already a great range of projects that show the benefits of integrating arts and culture into infrastructure. The artworks delivered through these projects have played a key role in placemaking, and they've increased the use of public spaces and have become landmarks in our communities that show the identities of our places and people. The arts and infrastructure policy can be a great tool to stimulate greater use of art in the built environment. This will contribute to the social, economic and cultural fabric of the city and creates opportunities to support the overall vision of the council. It supports economic development, it creates opportunities for local artists and has the potential to improve the quality of the built environment and value of public facilities, and also to create new professional and economic opportunities for Hamilton artists. Of course, it's important to ensure that any implementation of this policy is informed by the practicalities of the project that it is aligned with, that it meets requirements of safety and maintenance and materials that align with other civic requirements. But the opportunity here is to create a new framework for telling these stories, for building a process to bring arts, culture and creativity into the processes early on rather than as an afterthought, and to shape a sense of place that helps to build upon the momentum already developing in our fast-growing city. Placemaking is a powerful government tool for engaging communities in the planning, design and management of shared public assets. Placemaking shows people how powerful their collective vision can be. And given that we have local evidence of how arts and culture increase connection to community in place, the creative sector and their interests should be represented in these opportunities. Arts, culture and creativity provide useful skills and spaces for the creation, development and expression of local identity and stories, and having art and infrastructure does that at a foundational level for the city. Around 6 in 10 Waikato residents feel that the arts are important in creating a vibrant place to live and play a significant role in their community's future. They also want their community to be recognised as a place that supports the arts. We can see that Council is already doing exciting work in this area, but we see that there's also more to be explored. Of course, there are continued challenges ahead around scales of civic infrastructure and economic climate, but this policy seems intended to enable and encourage more of this good work with a sensible process, but also to bring in the artist's creative voice early into projects to create the infrastructure of tomorrow. Public art, in the broadest understanding, includes artistic practices that emphasise community involvement. Public art creates safer communities. It helps to mitigate issues of crime. Having art woven within civic infrastructure demonstrates how all these things can work together with a lens on getting the greatest impact for the value applied. Access to arts opportunities strengthens communities in a broad range of ways, and when there is early inclusion through artist selection and artwork development as part of the infrastructure process, these things can be woven in more directly, can be more successful to the overall vision of the project, and have a broad range of positive outcomes that are connected to all of the Council's goals. This seems to be a really exciting opportunity for Hamilton to build upon its recent momentum, work already taking place in Council, alongside work from a number of passionate groups like MESH and the Riff Raff Trust, through the important work of connection with mana whenua and Waikato Tainui. And there's so much potential for this in our city as a positive expression of place. And so Creative Waikato looks forward to continuing to work strategically with Hamilton City Council on the future implementation of this policy. Thanks.
We've got 3 minutes for questions, if anyone has any. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jeremy, as always, for your submission and your advocacy for the arts sector. Just one question. The next step in the policy is, if the policy is adopted, will be the process that sits behind it for how artists will engage in the right way. Do you have an example of how that works in another city that you could share with us?
There are a range of examples. Some of that is through having a panel of subject matter experts. Some of that is through working with strategic partner community organisations to create a conduit for that engagement. It will depend on how the policy and process is written, also acknowledging that this is looking at all scales of infrastructure, and the things that happen at small scale will be different to things that happen at big scale. So there'll need to be some flexibility there. But I think there's a really exciting opportunity in also looking at how we leverage local procurement in that, as creating opportunities for artists who are based here to be involved in these processes, and really leaning into the possibility for how that strengthens the local economy as well.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Easy. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Next up, we have Paul Bradley. You're also not a stranger to this.
Yep.
But you've got 5 minutes.
Thank you.
If you want questions, leave time.
Okay.
Otherwise, just keep talking.
Sure. Thanks, Louise. Tēnā koutou katoa. For those who don't know me, yes, my name's Paul Bradley. I have been in Hamilton for about 13 years and have been heavily involved in the arts the whole time that I've been here. So just a few sort of highlights, I guess. I started the Boone Street Art Festival 10 years ago. Ran that for a while as director and then later as chair. I worked at Creative Waikato for 9 years. I was part of a previous council public art panel, and at the moment I'm a full-time mural artist, and I've been doing that for coming up to 4 years. So what I have found through all of these projects is, without a doubt, Hamiltonians love public art. One of the benefits I get from being a muralist painting is that I'm literally doing that in the street and getting the mood of the street, if you like, and a huge cross-section of society, and it's vastly positive. It's very, very rare that there's any kind of negative response to that, because people love it. They know that it makes our city so much better in so many ways. I won't go over because Jeremy did such a great job of covering. So I think this is a really smart bit of policy. I think it'll serve you really well. I know I haven't got much time, so I'll just add a few things that I think would strengthen this policy. One of the things is to make sure that you have a really clear decision-making process around the artwork. I know that in the past, with things like the Michael Parakowhai Tongue of the Dog, there was a bit of a fiasco around decision-making with that, and that's kind of was sorted out in the end, but I think that it really highlighted for people that the decisions about what art is commissioned where and how that works needs to be, have the right people involved for everyone's sake. The other point I want to make is, at the moment, the policy says up to 1%, which really has no teeth, because that could be 0%. So I really encourage you to just commit, just make it 1%. It's just 1%. You've still got 99% to spend on the rest, and you'll get massive benefit. Artists are really good at, for better or worse, making an investment go really far and giving you really, really good value. So so I really encourage you to firm that up as the 1%. The other point I want to make is to consider maintenance and review. In the policy at the moment, there's some wording, I can't remember exactly, but it says something along the lines of commissioning, or ensuring that work is long-lasting, something around that. As a mural artist, I mean, I consider murals to be temporary artworks, even though they might last for 20 years. So just think about how you treat different artwork within this policy, because your 1% won't often give you enough to commission some big thing made of stainless steel that's going to last for decades and decades. So think about how you can be flexible with a policy to get, because something like a mural gives you really great impact for a not big investment compared to a sculpture. When I worked doing mural type work in Wellington, they had a policy, I don't know what they're doing now, but at the time it was that when murals are commissioned after 10 years, then they're reviewed. And they make a decision at that point whether they just keep them going or whether there's a refresh or what happens. So there's some work that could be done there. I don't want to get locked into things that have to be long lasting and more expensive. And then the last point that I'll make is I really encourage you to create some sort of register of preferred suppliers, because not all artists will be up for this kind of work. It does take experience, takes professionalism, so just to look at track record, reputation, things like that, just to make sure that you have a good list of artists, but also to make sure that you're not working with the same artist or artists time and time again, so that you want a real diversity of work in what you're putting out there, so that different stories can be told and different styles can be represented and things like that, and have a range of approaches. But I see I've got 5 seconds left. Yeah.
We have quite a relaxed morning, so I might let a couple of questions in if we've got names on the board. Councillor Van Oosten is at the top, so I will let you go first.
Thank you, and thank you for your work locally. I know some of those pieces and appreciate them.
Thank you.
Jeremy talked about procurement and about the local impact of that. Being a local artist, and you've suggested the register of artists, diversity, would you also rate that local is important to be considered in that aspect as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be very biased with my answer, but absolutely, I think for a number of reasons. I mean, there's not many of us full-time artists at all in Hamilton. It's not an easy thing to do, and to be honest, probably half of my work is done elsewhere, so I get a bit tired of going up that southern motorway. If I could do more work here, that is great, and I think it's great to consider the local arts economy in that question, as well as local voices are important. You know, one of the things I'm most proud of with Boon is that we're able to share so many voices of all sorts of people from New Zealand, people from overseas, tangata whenua, so let local people tell local stories in their neighbourhood, definitely.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Huata, if you've got a very quick
Quick
question.
as. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora.
Nice to see you. My question is about the preferred registrar of preferred artists, and where is the room for emerging artists and a tuakana taina relationship where established artists bring up and coming artists. I want to give an example of the Hamilton Gardens where the frosting on the windows, the design was done by a graduate fresh out of Toi Haukura, who might not necessarily in this framework get a look in. So where's the room for emerging artists?
Yeah, great question. I think that does happen organically anyway. Like, I work a lot with interns, so I am paired up with someone at Wintec at the moment. I've worked with all sorts of youth, particularly in the past. So that does happen, but I think you could definitely make some space for that. I guess it's about making sure that works for the artists as professionals as well, so it's getting those right relationships and connections. But that's a great example, the frosting, because the artists don't always need to be involved in the practical, like, making of the work. There are examples where someone might be great at designing something and then it gets manufactured, if you like. So they don't necessarily, because that's one of the, I guess, there's sort of the main skills that are needed are the creative development of a work, but then the practical development. So that would be an excellent way to approach that, for sure.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, cheers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for your time and attention. Cheers.
Now, if you were looking at your agenda, Des Ratama is not available to come in this morning, so we're going to jump straight to Margaret Evans.
She was wanting to present, but she's not on list. Has she withdrawn?
I'm not sure. Yeah. 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 Do you know if she was planning to be here this morning, Tim?
I don't, I'm sorry, it's just that I read her
okay.
submission and saw that she wanted to speak to it.
Well, we might crack on. Margaret, if you'd like to come up to the come up to the seat.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou. We're a group, by the way, and very amorphous group. And so Colin Jones is with us today because obviously we want to emphasise cost. And I want to say two things to begin. Firstly, the concept of public art is ancient. I've been in caves in Spain and delighted at 18,000-year-old public art. I also want to emphasise, don't separate art from quality design. We have extraordinarily brilliant architects in this country as well as internationally. And again, I've admired crazy buildings like Frank Gehry's, and some of you may recall some of the early responses to the Sydney Opera House, for instance. So the danger in this policy is twofold. One, it separates art out when it must be included. You should be demanding on quality design in everything that you do. And also the irony is, as Jeremy has said, the concept of 1% is nearly a century old. It's taken you a really long time to get it onto the agenda. And ironically, Councillor Angela, I'm looking at you, and Mayor Paul is not here, and Jeff, I can see you up on the screen. You, three of you, were at the Local Government New Zealand conference in 2017 when this was the theme of the conference. So I'm giving you a little bit of a rap over the knuckles here, but please be assured, Toti is amongst the many, many people who obviously want to see more art and quality design in everything we do. I want to also point out, however, at this year's local government conference, you were also reminded that the current government is ensuring there is fiscal responsibility in what councils do. And the financial crisis that we currently face in this country is severe, but it doesn't stop you from loving art, quality design. So I want to go on and say our submission, which is page 135, is hold everything until March, when you'll have a much better grip on the financial situation in the city and you will have a new team. Thank you very much for being so decisive, finally, on the Footsteps in History project. We will be motoring on that. I'm asking staff to put up the image, please, on the screen. Now, this was the Millennium Sculpture. It was unfortunately destroyed when the footpaths were put in round the front of the museum to give better access to cycles. And I spoke to the artist again. For the last 5 years, she has said she is prepared to create a new one for the cost to be negotiated, of course. But I want to emphasise the importance of this sculpture because it's made of Hinawera stone, and I acknowledge mana whenua in this because that was the original pathway of the Waikato River. And that is symbolic of yesterday, today and tomorrow. It's also the family. And it is such a tragedy that that was destroyed, and despite negotiations, it still has not been replaced. We also believe that the current budget to work on the green spaces, which is where the Founders Theatre was, should be immediately used to repair the Frankton commemorative, we call it the Dandelion statue. It again is appalling that for want of $500,000, you turned down the opportunity to repair that. And yet the Rotary Club of Frankton gifted that to the people of Hamilton, and that's a piece of public art. And it does desperately deserve to be repaired. We also are recommending that you open the door, finally, for the public discussion on the Captain Hamilton statue. Stop hiding it behind the scenes, bring it out to the public and have a proper discussion on it. There are places where it might be suitable. And finally, we want to refer, as I said to Jeremy, the globally recognised Te Ara Peka Peka Bridge. It might be beautiful, but it's also approaching $200 million in cost. And I had someone say to me the other day, you could have created the most magnificent bridge for probably, a Bailey Bridge, for instance, for probably maybe 3 or 4 or 5 million. That sort of activity has simply got to stop because it's just added to the impossibility of building effective public housing, effective ordinary housing, because of the costs in Peacock. And that's really all I've got to say, except I'm going to quote Chief Executive Lance in the pre-election report. He says, we must rethink how we work, how we fund services, and how we collaborate to support a growing city. Get better at planning and get better at budgeting. And now Colin has got some recent information about the costs in Peacock, which relates to what we're talking about. And you can see we believe in integrating art and quality design with the economy, with the environment, and with the social and cultural framework. So Colin's got a few points he wants to make to just emphasise what that bridge has done to Peacocks.
Thank you, Margaret. Okay, my name's Colin Jones. I've been operating as a real estate agent since 1970. I was involved extensively in Peacocks since the 1980s. In fact, I did a lot of work for the Ministry of Works, selling them sections for affordable housing back in the 80s, and I was involved in the sale of the original block of land that was owned by the government to the Johnson family in the 1980s. I appeared for the Johnson family in the Environment Court in 2013, where Lachlan McDowney produced a letter to say that the estimate for the bridge across the Waikato River was $20 million. Okay? In 2016, it was estimated by the staff at between $80 to $100 million. By the time you actually went for the infrastructure loan in 2018, it had blown out to $120 million. And I got this information just the other day. I've been asking it from the staff. They have been very reluctant to give it to me. And although I've actually asked for the details, they've only given me like 2 pages out of 19 on spreadsheets. But in 2019, the bridge was then 133 million. It blew out to 2021 at 156 million. By 2023, it had blown out to 183,400,000. The last information they've given me, which is now the end of last year, 194,300,000.
So
now, sorry.
We want to allow time for questions, and you can see that we have got much more information if you want. And I want to make a final point. Everything is art, but it's connected. And I want to say that we had a project which we've referred to in the agenda where we were working with one of New Zealand's top artists, Brett Graham, to do this magnificent Kete o Whakaotarangi, which was a fountain bubbling over with prosperity. And we put a hold on that simply because it was too difficult to deal through the council's public art policies. Remember, everything is connected. You've got a chance here to drive some really important stuff for the future, but don't forget the dollars. What is concerning the public at the moment right across the country is the cost of living crisis and the sort of money councils spend. Partnership is a very good way to go, but even partners won't come to the party if they think it's excessive. Kia ora, best of luck. You've seen our recommendations. Please take them seriously. And you've seen that beautiful, beautiful photograph. And as I said, that artist, Carla van der Veen, is prepared to work with the council and restore that millennium memento.
Can I make one comment? In 2008, the development contributions in Peacock was 34,000 a section, and at 34,000 a section, at that stage they were estimating about 8,400 houses for 20,000 people over 20 years. That would have repaid the total infrastructure loan of about 300 million. You pushed that figure up to 46,000 in 2000. 2 years ago, you increased it to 98,000 and 134,000 for Peacocks too. On the basis of the current policy, you are trying to recover $1 billion from developers for a $500 million infrastructure cost. And you wonder why Peacocks is unviable. The retirement village operator that I sold, I spoke to them 2 months or 3 months ago. They've got resource consent for their retirement village. They're not going ahead. Nothing in Peacocks is viable on the basis of your current policy.
Art is good.
Thanks. Thank you both. We are running out of time and our next speaker is here, so I might unfortunately skip questions. But thank you very much for both coming in.
I'm happy to give a talk because I know intimately what the issues are, what the solutions are, but this is not the time. But you need to actually understand.
Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Colin.
Art is good, we repeat.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Mark Servian. Thank you for coming in early, much earlier than what we had scheduled you for. So I really appreciate it.
Kia ora, folks. So the last time I sat here was for the public art policy, memorial policy, so I have a sense of deja vu. I'm here on behalf of the Riff Raff Public Art Trust, largely because actually we have made art and infrastructure a bit of a priority for us. You may recall a couple of years ago we decided that, as well as being Riff Raff, named after the statue, we decided to expand our remit to be in favour of art for the Riff Raff generally, as I think about the common Riff Raff as opposed to the statue. And so part of that, apart from doing things like the Festival of Weird and taking over Mesoverse, has been my own personal interest based on my experience from working in Embassy Park, that the most constructive way to approach trying to do creative things is actually to sneak some art into what's happening anyway. I've believed for some years that there's not enough money in the art budget, so I prefer to go after the other budgets in terms of trying to get creative outcomes. And so to that end, worked very successfully with part of the council to get the pimped up bespoke bike stands outside the Meteor. That process with Sean Christian has really straightforward. So, you know, that was good. Really, and we've got an ongoing discussion with him. There's a formula there. So if we, in terms of pimping bike stands around the city, can do that. Really the only thing holding it back is I'm busy with Embassy Park at the moment. In that respect, I just wanted to flag that obviously the previous speakers talking about Peacock and big bridges and everything else. I'm really interested in the micro stuff. I'm interested in seeing as much creative treatments of the everyday as we can possibly manage, because basically there are bike stands, there are seats, there are street furniture everywhere. And if you have the same ones that are in Auckland, how do you know when you see a photograph of a street that it's actually in Hamilton? So therefore, the more we can make just the everyday stuff specific to a particular location, then that goes a long way to genuine placemaking. Within that context, though, I also want to kind of repeat the point that I made when I sat here and talked about the public art policy and memorial policy, in which I was addressing the challenge around Captain Hamilton, which is to say that a policy is all very well because it sets up the parameters, but actually in the context of Captain Hamilton, the reason I think that that happened was the absence of an art agenda, not a policy, but an agenda, as in the council actually having an opinion about what it is trying to achieve in a general space, in the creative space. In that case, it struck me that the obvious thing was that the city needed a memorial to both Kirikiriroa and Hamilton. Now, I don't think politicians, with all due respect, should be involved in the minutiae of particular pieces of art. But I see no reason why the council itself cannot have a general parameter, and not a rule, actually just a parameter. And the reason being is it can go both ways. Therefore, you can get some entities who want to do things that fulfil the council's agenda. Now, in the case of Captain Hamilton, the whole point I was making at the time was that it's a very legitimate and worthwhile thing for a city to do to memorialise where it came from. The trouble was that it got created by a particular, the Captain Hamilton was created by virtue of the opinions of the people who were commissioning it, which is fine. What I was trying to think of was how do you thread the needle between avoiding a situation like Captain Hamilton from happening, while at the same time allowing something like riffraff to happen. And in that respect, why I'm not saying a rule is that if it's a parameter, then you can both, at the outset, the artist can work with it. Art is often more facilitated by restriction, facilitated by knowing what you're going to be working, what the parameters you're working within, rather than a blank sheet of paper. And so if you have a parameter that says this is what the city wants to say about itself, this is what the city wants to say about its history, then you can either A, go with that, or B, react against it. And reacting against it is perfectly fine because that's clearly what you're trying to do. In the absence of an agenda and in the absence of a parameter, you'll have something that may or may not. So I think the trouble is you set up the policy which sort of defines the playing field, but then you don't actually have the rules of the game in place to then play in place. So that's really that's the main point I really wanted to make, was that policies are great, but what about an actual agenda? What does the city want to say about itself? Because if you don't have that in place, then there's a vacuum that whoever's funding the piece of work will fill. Because, to be clear, everybody who's doing a piece of art has got an agenda. Don't think they haven't. I had an agenda. I'm interested in Rocky Horror. But when I commissioned the Riffraff statue, I wasn't doing it because I was a Rocky Horror fan. It's because I wanted to kick this town in the ankles and make it realise that, hey, it's got a cow at one end of the street. How about a man with fishnets at the other? That covers the range of possibilities, right? And so, yeah, exactly. So my point being is that as I say, that there's a vacuum. That the policy is the need for policy is clear. The idea of giving a bit of the development contribution to making sure there is some public art, great. But then when you do that, when the developers then try to do the piece of art with the money that they've had to put aside, what is it that the artist is being asked to either go with or push against? That's my main point. An agenda is needed, not just a policy. Thank you.
There's 3 minutes left, but Mark is...
It's all right. I'm known for being early and concise.
That's all good. All right. Wow, that's a very easy way of saying no questions. No questions. You're fine.
Thank you. Yes, we're going to have a celebration of the return of Riffraff 28th of March next year.
Oh, good.
And again, council workers have been wonderful to work with on that front. Thanks to all of them.
If the live stream didn't pick that up, that's the 28th of March is the Riffraff celebration. Return of Riffraff.
Yeah.
Excellent. That brings us... So that brings us to the end of our submissions this morning. And so I'm going to invite Joanna Van Walraven up to speak to the hearings report.
very much like the last hearing report. There wasn't, really just wanted to thank submitters and verbal and written for submitting to the policy, and really just take questions from elected members to bring back to the report, which is coming on, just lost it, 22nd September, 18th September.
I believe you.
Yeah. The deliberations report. So.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Now, colleagues, might we just go around the room with questions? Yeah. Yeah. Deputy Mayor O'Leary is the first person with their mic on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure you've picked up these things, but I'd like the report to just touch on the key points of the process that will implement the policy.
Sure.
And what that might look like. Don't need to see the full thing at this stage, but also possibly the process and how that will be reported back or for elected member feedback, if that's appropriate. Specifically a panel and how that's been raised by quite a few submitters this morning, as well as in the written submissions, and how that process might work, how that might be equitable, and yeah, all of that stuff. I would like to see, as mentioned today, but also Kate Leach in the written submission, supports youth being able to, or under 25 specifically, being able to be involved, and how that might work through the policy. And also Dr. Mail raised today, as well as it's being raised in other written submissions about local procurement, and I think Paul Bradley also talked about that. And I think that was the main, and also just commentary on, again, raised today in the submissions as well as written, around the policy, the of it not saying up to 1%, of it saying 1%, because there's still the filter there, because in the policy, because it says the council will consider the inclusion. So I just because that's raised in submissions, I'd like a little bit of discussion on that, or some staff advice. Thank you, Chair, that's all.
Wonderful. Councillor Maxine?
Not to make the same points, but to emphasise the power of local. It's really a priority for me, and having it link back to our current procurement policy and you know, some visibility on that would be helpful, I think. I guess the policy might, the existing policy might allow for that at some point, but knowing where that intersect is would be helpful. There was also the suggestion from Mark just now about an agenda and a statement agenda, and how and where that might be helpful, but maybe not in the policy, but as a separate something that could align with it, might be something that I'd be interested in hearing more about. And did Deputy Mayor talk about the Register of Artists and wanting to see some kind of diversity on that, and kind of a formal kind of a part of that? It might be included in the procurement section that could be considered there, with, you know, different elements that have been discussed today that would be helpful for our community. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
No worries. Councillor Tawariki?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm good.
Excellent. Councillor Casey Cox?
There was a submitter, I think it was Fiona Murdoch, who talked about performance art and how that might be somehow included. I don't know how, but it would be good to have a little bit more discussion on that. And in terms of the parameter that Mark mentioned, I wondered, there was a submission from Waikato Tainui on an anchor, they mentioned an anchor narrative, so I didn't know if that was the same sort of idea, that we have some cohesion or an idea of what the story, what Mark said, basically, yeah. But acknowledging Waikato Tainui may have been saying something similar, so. No, just support Deputy Mayor's suggestion around that 1% and maybe just some options, like could it be at least something to 1% or, I don't know, a little bit more concrete in that regard.
Great, that's it. Thank you. Councillor Huata?
Oh, kia ora, Joe. Support all the comments being made. So support local artist procurement, make sure there's a youth voice. How do we involve emerging artists, that tuakana taina relationship, internships, I don't know how you might approach that. Absolutely support a panel of experts with the appropriate subject matter knowledge. And Mark hit it on the nose with an agenda. I actually think that would round out the policy fully. And, you know, how do we see ourselves as a city? How do we want to see ourselves as a city? And you're right, Councillor Anna, I see that Glenda couldn't be here to talk to their submission. They're overseas at the moment. And so, absolutely, what is the narrative framework that anchors us within the policy itself? And how can that affect and promote potential cultural tourism, so that that economic value that's been spoken about from the different submitters in terms of having art embedded, and from big scale, from big scale buildings to what Mark said, bike stands, rubbish bins, seats. How do we look different to other cities across the world? Kia ora.
Awesome. Councillor McIndoe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've actually got quite a few questions and endorsed the comments of colleagues before, so I'll try not to be repetitive. I think Councillor Maxine has already alluded to Paul Bradley's submission, but I too would be grateful to hear some more details about how we ensure greater equity and opportunities for a wider range of artists to contribute, because I think he made a really compelling point there. I was very concerned to hear about the what was described as the destruction of the Millennium sculpture near the museum, and then the comment was made, despite negotiations, it still has not been replaced. So could we please have an update as to why that is, what's been happening, and in particular whether the sculptor, who I gather is making a very generous offer, is being treated with respect so that she knows that offer is appreciated, because I can't imagine that there wouldn't be anyone who wouldn't want to see that piece of art restored. There is obviously sensitivity around the whole issue of Captain Hamilton, but people do ask quite regularly, where is it, what's happened? So if we could please have a bit of an update. I note that one of the submitters was suggesting that a couple of councillors should be involved in the negotiations that might be needed. I'd be happy to be a part of that, because I do appreciate it needs to be done sensitively, with wide consultation with all interested parties. The comment was made very forcefully by Toti in particular that the Te Ara Peka Peka Bridge could have been achieved at significantly lower cost. I'd appreciate why did it ultimately end up costing so much? You're looking concerned about this, but I'm just aware of the fact that well, yeah, I mean, well, okay, I appreciate that point, but the frustration is how often we get an opportunity to explore these very important questions for our city.
I just wonder if there's another opportunity except besides through this process, just given the time frames.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Okay.
raise them at any
Deliver this.
point to a general manager or...
I could, but I don't actually think that that has quite the sunlight of the disinfectant of sunlight, rather, that we need in what is a public forum. And
we could take them as staff actions, though.
I accept your ruling, but I would be grateful. I think we need progress. We're not doing well enough in these sorts of areas.
Otherwise, just...
we might just take those as staff actions, if that's all right. Did you have any further ones about that?
No, I take your point. Fair enough.
Councillor Wilson?
Very little to add, just caution about how staff are going to try to navigate the quantum of 0 to 1% contribution as clearly those discussions are an annual plan and an LTP discussion each 3 years. So I'd be interested in sort of understanding how you're going to try to add that into what is a broader policy. Right? Because, yeah, I think it's self-explanatory.
That's all. Wonderful. You're all good. Councillor Jeff, online?
I don't think there's anything else that I need more information on. I thought the submitters were really good today, and a couple of things I was going to mention have been covered. So thank you. I'm good.
Andrew?
Right, I'll just get my notes. Can we report back on how to prioritise spending on art and minimise spending on process, such as reports, committees and admin? And what are the obstacles of getting stuff done, like the footsteps in history and the Millennium Sculpture replacement? How can we speed things up with a suggestion that bringing stuff to council meetings early can sidestep these obstacles?
We can talk about process.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. A couple of notes from me, really agree with the comments made so far. I was just curious because the strategic considerations section of the report was very good, and it also referenced the open spaces strategy, and it talks about high quality, inclusive, safe and culturally rich open spaces. But I was just wondering about tying that into, I think it was Mark and Paul might have touched on it in terms of that, like placemaking. I'd be good to know if the open spaces strategy might not have anything prescriptive about placemaking, but just would be interested to know if there was any further overlap between the two. Does that make sense as a question? Okay. What was my... I fear that everyone else has taken all of the good points, but that's all right. Yeah, I did want to give out a shout out to the 30-year-olds who seem to have been massively overrepresented in the submissions. Yes, 30-year-olds. But Councillor Maria's point about youth involvement was really good, I thought. And we've talked a bit about local procurement, but that tuakana taina aspect, I think, would be good to know if we need to be prescriptive about that or not, or if it's something that we can just be done as a BAU approach. Does that make sense? I can elaborate afterwards if that's more helpful. Oh, and the 0 to 1%, I was just curious whether or not there's detail in the policy about if the public aren't going to see the infrastructure, it doesn't need art. So if it's the inside of a pipe, it doesn't need a mural on it.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that was where that 0% came in.
I can actually explain that now.
Great.
So the intention on the policy is that it would be, that's excluded from the policy, anything underground, out of public view, all those sort of things, which is quite a bit of our budget, obviously. But the reason it was 0 to 1% was just dependent on the project. You know, we have large pieces of infrastructure, say like a bridge. 1% of that budget might be enormous, whereas 1% of it, because it's the idea of it, the policy is to be scalable. Then we can be quite nimble with maybe smaller infrastructure things where we can just sort of put something in like a window into a wall or something like that, or a decorative thing. So that was the intention of that, was sort of the 1% was to give some kind of confidence that we wouldn't be breaking the bank, you know, or impacting too much overall. So that was the intention of that, as opposed to a sort of fixed budget that we have, that we go into to get fund art from.
Cool. And the only other thing I had was just that comment about the different, you have to treat different artworks differently because their lifespan might be different.
Yeah.
Do we have a kind of nice table somewhere that talks about, a mural has a 10-year lifespan or a sculpture might be longer? Do we have anything that mocked up in some other?
We could put something together for that, yeah, quite easily, yeah.
Cool. Well,
they would all be different, but
yeah.
What Paul was saying around like having a review period, I think,
yes,
could be really helpful.
Wonderful.
But, yeah, there's a sort of a general resilience. So like, for example, and that would work across the context. So, for example, if you're going to do a mural, then you're expected to do one that has paint that can be cleaned or something like that. And but if you're doing something that is no one's going to be able to touch or access and is in a large piece of infrastructure, then obviously we're going to want something that's really robust. So there's a bit of context around that. But yeah, I can do that quite easily. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's no more rogue hands up of someone who's forgot something, so I'm going to take that as a good sign. I'll move to accept the hearings report. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Tim, too fast to everyone else. Easy peasy. All right, all those in favour of accepting? None opposed? That's us for the day. So we're going to close with our karakia, which governance staff are so prepared with. Awesome. Tēnei te whakairi, tēnei te whakawātia, haumia, huia, taike. Thank you so much. It's 10:27 and we're done.